All right, all right, all right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this live stream. I've been very excited about this since I found out that we were going to have this opportunity to chat with Tanner and, of course, Jamie. And there are a lot of interesting and fun, and for me and people like me and many web developers, there's a lot of really fun and interesting stuff in the works. And so that's what we're going to chat about today. I'm sure most of the people watching know that there is just a lot going on, and we are happy to be part of that conversation. So my name is Tom. I'm head of developer experience at Convex. And with us today, we have Tanner Linsley and we have Jamie Turner. You guys want to say hi?
Hi.
Hello.
Perfect. Cool. So Tanner is the force behind all things TanStack. You might have heard of a little thing called React Router, which is now TanStack Router and TanStack Query. And actually, there is a whole list of beautiful things. Look at this. Not only this, but Tanner, I do want to compliment you on your design chops, because your website looks amazing and is extremely legible. I don't know if you have help with that or not, but whoever is behind that, that's all you?
Most of the design is just me over the course of many years, just trying to figure out what works.
It is
Nice.
a very nice looking website. I like
Thanks.
TanStack.
I mean, I don't think so, but if everybody else does, then I guess it's good.
Yeah.
Tanner, is there anything that you do that's not world class?
What's the story behind the logo, Tanner? I was always curious about the logo.
The logo. So the name itself was a little weird to begin with. It was just kind of a nickname that a friend gave me. It's actually Sean Wang. He's not too much in the front end ecosystem anymore, but Swix. Have you ever heard of Swix?
Oh yeah, Sean. Yeah.
Yeah, he called me TanStack just in passing, just for fun, and he joked around that you should name your company TanStack. I said, oh, that's not a bad idea. So when I jumped on that, I was like, oh, that's cool, but I needed like a logo, some type of a stamp or something, and I just thought I'm building software to not have to work anymore. Essentially, like I just want to go hang out on a beach while my software does all the work. And so I was like, I'm just going to adopt this beach chair, palm tree, desert island kind of a vibe. And it looked the very first version was like straight out of MS Paint, and I didn't care. I like the cartoonism of it. Just trying not to take myself too seriously, So that's just how it came to be. It'll evolve, and it's evolving right now. But yeah, I like the palm tree, just kind of relaxing motto vibe.
Cool.
Yes, that's awesome. I love the history behind naming is hard, right?
Yeah.
So I love getting the backstory behind the different names for different things. Tanner, have you been able to stop working and go chill out on a beach and just build the stuff that you want to build?
I'll be honest. I enjoy it so much that I don't think I could do that long term. But I have been able to take a little bit of time with my family and hang out on the beach every now and then. I don't know why I live in Utah, but it seems like we're headed to California way too much these days. So
yeah, I hear that. There is something in Utah. There are a number of exceptional tech companies and people in the tech industry who live out there. It's like compared with the general population, it is definitely a disproportionately hot tech hub.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion around why and how, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Now it's a snowball, right? So it could just attract more talent, and yeah, it's a great place to live. I love it here. I'm probably not leaving. So
yeah, it's very beautiful. Yeah, I drove through there a couple of years ago, spent some time camping and stuff, and spent some time at Bear Lake in the upper. Yeah, it was super fun. Anyway,
I went to Bear Lake as a kid every summer. I love it up there. So
yeah. Cool.
That's awesome. So there is a very cool project. It's not really a secret, but it's definitely early in the work that I wanted to talk about because I think when I first came across it, it felt like this a perfect match for what we do at Convex. But beyond what we do as a product company, it felt like there was so much alignment in values, and I'll probably end up prompting some discussion around that quite a bit because I feel like the Venn diagram of our shared values is close to like a full circle. And I think like that's just a very cool opportunity. And so I think that the fact that we've been able to work together a little bit on this project and help out in in any way that we can with what you're doing feels like a real privilege to me. And I want to thank you for that. But without further ado, this is what I am like over the moon excited about. And I know it's making progress every day, every week. Uh, Tanner, can you just talk a little bit more about TanStack Start? What are your plans for it? Where is it now? Like, what's the future shaping up to be?
Sure. So it's a full stack framework. There's no getting around it. It's similar in goals to something like Next.js or Remix or Redwood. And but it has a slightly different approach to things than those frameworks, which I think is a good thing. We don't need more of the same. But it also has a lot in common with both of those frameworks, and I think the good parts, right? To understand where it's going, I think it's useful to understand kind of where it came from. In the early days, I wanted something that I could layer on top of my single page applications that would give me kind of this new modern toolkit everybody was bragging about, like, oh, I'm using Next and it's so great. I'm using Remix and it's so awesome. And I was like, well, what are those things that are so awesome? And so I tried all these things out and I'm like, wow, some of these things are amazing. But my problem was that it was a big lift to take something like my company's single page application and completely move it over to this server first approach, the server first methodology. And it's possible to do, definitely, but it was going to be a really, really big lift for maybe not too much of an ROI, especially where I was still building mostly a single page application. A lot of it was behind authentication, and I wasn't too concerned about kind of the priorities that these frameworks prioritize. First page speed, how fast does it load that first page, and SEO, just everything being really easy around that. I was more interested in kind of the long tail experience of the session, of how smooth are my interactions and how much value can I get to the user through workflows and things like that. But just because I prioritize those things doesn't mean that I didn't want the ability to do server functions and RPCs, or be able to SSR some pages or some unauthenticated endpoints if I wanted. And I also wanted to have a really great bundling strategy, right? Because up to that point, I had moved over to Vite, and Vite was great, but I was still doing a lot of things manually, managing my own little index HTML templating thing. And I was jealous of some of these features, right? And in good faith, I did try and convert my SPA over to use some of these frameworks. And in my tests, it didn't leave me very happy with the experience. One of the reasons that I wasn't happy about that experience was because I had to leave my router behind. So I built TanStack Router because it's fully type safe. And I needed that type safety for a lot of these really dense pages and dense URLs that I had, that users were navigating between dashboards and changing widgets and paginating everywhere and changing filters all the time. And I needed to be able to save all that and make it shareable and bookmarkable and just really work well. And we ran into the problem where, we were inadvertently creating toggles and links and filters that were illegal. We'd say, oh, click this link, and it would take you to a page where the search parameters weren't supported for that page or for that route or whatever. So long story short, type safety is really important for a router. And it goes really, really deep into state management, not just, oh, is this path, a path that we have in our app? Yay. Like, it's not too difficult to get kind of these shallow, path safety and param safety things. It really comes down to state management. So I wanted to build a router that had the same type expectations out of something like a first-class state manager. So I built the router, and I brought that with me into this new world of frameworks, right? And that's really where it is today. Is it's 90% TanStack Router. And what you get with TanStack Start is truly this optional layering you get on top of it. So the way that it works is you build TanStack Router. Basically, you can start with one of the templates even if you want. And when you add in TanStack Start, you get three things. You get an SSR entry point. So now if you want to SSR any pages, you can. And all the utilities packed in to do that. You get a bundler and a deployment solution that is based on Vinci and Nitro, which is based on Vite. So there's a bit of a stack there, but essentially what that means is that you can just bundle once and deploy it anywhere. Nitro is what powers Nuxt in the Vite ecosystem, and you just say, this is where I'm deploying, and you connect it, and it just works. And then the third thing you get that's really, really important is server functions and API routes, but mainly the server functions that are RPCs are just the coolest part about it. Because up to this point, if you look at what developers usually want out of these new features, is they want to be able to use the server and run a server and do things that are hidden behind the server, but they want to do that in the most easy way possible. And with tools like Next.js and Remix, you have these very, very specific API surface areas that allow you to dip into the server, like Loader for Remix and Next.js. You've got get server-side props, or in the app router, you're kind of in this new server component model. And there's a lot of constraints around those areas. And I wanted something a little more flexible. And I don't know, anybody in the audience remembers our little discussion about Bling. But Bling was this kind of experimental concept that I worked on with Ryan Carniato at Solid and Nikhil Saraf, who built Vinci. And it was the ability to kind of do what Quick does, but in React, where you could just wrap any function with a marker and say, this belongs on the server. And that's it. And you could put that function anywhere. You could define it anywhere. And it would just become something that will only execute on the server. And I love that idea. Bling did not work out because we kind of bit off a little more than we could chew at the time. But luckily, Nikhil, we brought that concept over into Vinci, and we kind of made it compatible with use server. So everybody in the React ecosystem is going down, the use server directive, and you can just kind of put that on a function and it will run on the server. We've kind of taken that to the next level with a first-class function wrapper that gives you type safety, gives you the ability to customize some of the implementation of that RPC that goes from the client to the server. But the most important part, though, is that you can just put those functions anywhere. So say you were running an SPA and you upgraded to TanStack Start, you theoretically wouldn't need to change anything. And then all of a sudden you can just kind of put some, a create server function wrapper around one of your functions, and now it just magically executes only on the server. I think that's pretty valuable, especially as a as a method of like incrementally moving logic into the server. And then obviously, I hope that people would be willing to migrate to TanStack Router, because not just to say, oh, I'm using a different router, but for all of the really great things that I think TanStack Router brings to the table. Type safety, the APIs are designed for state management in the URL. There's tons of pro and advanced features that you're just not going to get in any other router. And there's tons more coming down the pipeline. So that's TanStack start. There's not a whole lot else to it, other than, what you're going to build with it. So
that is awesome. Thank you so much. It's funny. It's always like trade-offs, right? And we are absolutely a blessed bunch of people in the web dev space with the number of like incredible tools that we have. But by their very nature, as we leverage different types of abstractions to make life easier or to be able to achieve something that was otherwise, much more difficult or tedious or cumbersome, I think inherently those come with opinions. And that means that there's lots of space in the web dev world for different approaches to how people want to apply themselves to build whatever it is that they have in mind. And I mean, one of my deepest held beliefs is that if the more people in the world that we have building software, the better off the world is. And it's projects like this that I think have a net result of more people building software in the world. And I think that's
I hope so.
I think it's a very, very good thing. You touched on a lot of your experiences and what you valued in terms of those trade-offs and what you wanted and what you were willing to give up, and a lot on type safety. And so like I mean I have a list here of the things that line up. But Jamie, I was wondering if you could actually speak to some of the overlap in our philosophy of how we believe people could and maybe even should build software, the overlap between Convex philosophy and TanStack philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool to hear Tanner walk through the history again, because I'm like, yep, that's exactly that experience. In many respects, the sort of early part of the origin story, that experience is the developers that use Convex's experience as well, right? So, I mean, one really quick thing about Convex, right, is that our sort of origin story, right, was like, if we ignore the way existing databases and controllers and queues and everything work, and you just are like, how are apps being built now? And how would you completely reimagine what a backend could represent itself as a kind of, the persistent state management thing that happens to live on servers, but who cares about that, right? How do you derive that design completely from the way that people like to build apps, right? So that was kind of our motivation. After we shipped that, at first we were a little wrong about something, right? Like our mindset was, well, we want to make an amazing DX, and we're kind of responsible for the backend DX, right? But you realize that the sort of manifestation of that goal ends up being that you've made a pretty seamless line between where the app ends and the backend begins. And so when people start to have confusion when they're making apps, it's not very satisfying to them to say, well, that part is not the part we have any influence over, right? So you realize, yeah, we want the entire app building experience to be good. You realize you have a shared ownership in the whole app DX. It's not really just the backend DX. And that's kind of where you ended up by taking on this goal. And so, yes, when some of the changes to Next came out, Next 14, a lot of developers using Convex were pretty confused, because to your point about trade-offs, Tom, is the trade-offs that were made did not seem to fit the kind of apps they were building, right? So they're building web applications, right? They're not building content-heavy sites, And so I think, to me, there's a lot of sophisticated places I think we align with TanStack and TanStack Start in the way it's approaching things. But a simplification of it is like SPA first and then SSR when you need to, as opposed to like server side first, and then like, what about SPAs, right? And everyone was a little like, well, there's not a clear answer for like, do we think SPAs are ending? Like that doesn't feel right to me. I mean, my world is
Never.
SPAs, right? So
SPAs are not going anywhere.
no, SPAs aren't going.
I'll die on that hill.
Yeah. So, and so
Agreed.
the complexity was taken on. Where like now I do things two different ways, right? Once on the client and once on the server, and like for a lot of developers, the fact that was front loaded, like that was the default experience out of the box, was like pretty befuddling to them. They were like, hey, performance is great, but like, my gosh, like my productivity hit just, it became major, right? To take this on. And now I'm doing things like learning about cache management policies, the edge and stuff like I haven't even shipped the first version of my app yet. Right. So I think that we too, yes, we want SEO to work. Yes, we love for that first render to have the data and there's no flash, there's no jank. We want all those things, but we want those things where the code is just as clean as it is when you didn't have that in your SPA. Like our goal is like, let's get those benefits without complicating your code. Let's not eliminate like component local reasoning, where mostly a component expresses the data it needs. You don't have this whole separate step where you reconsolidate all of your dependencies into a loader or something. I mean, sometimes you have to do that, but it's great to not have to and get the speed benefits anyway. So because our attitude was DX over everything, that really means like productivity over everything. And if you do need things to be faster at some points, that's very reasonable. But like you should opt into that when it's appropriate later in your project. And also too, the like framework and the platform should do as much of the heavy lifting as possible. And if the answer is I have to make my code a lot more complex or write it twice to achieve that, I don't think you've tried hard enough as a platform and a framework to. So yeah, so having something new that was being built that had the hooks that we needed, because we're this new backend thing that has tons of semantic information about what data you need, and even we have all the caching information, what the freshest values are, and we want to do things like have server side rendering be automatic, and it automatically resumes your SPA streaming new values to you once your SPA loads. It does require some cooperation. It requires cooperation, someone else to be like, yeah, those things matter. Let's go get that, And so that was what was very exciting about talking to Tanner and why we were like extremely excited in this project. And so when, Tanner was saying like, yeah, we're thinking of really doubling down on this. And like, part of what we're thinking of doing is this like sponsorship model with open source projects. That makes a ton of sense to us, right? Because like, this is a very valuable project, we think, for our developers, the people using Convex. We think this could be a great full stack platform. And so we're super excited about it and happy to be involved in whatever capacity you can. So so I guess, I don't know if that answers the question, Tom, but that's kind of our background on why I sort of like dug a little into this and was like, oh my gosh, like just think about if we married these things together, like how great could that DX be? So that's how we found our way here.
Yeah. I mean, you answered it perfectly. And I mean, what I hear, I mean, I'm in a developer experience role, so maybe it goes without saying, but as a developer myself, I definitely am seeking out the best experience possible, of course. And so that is pretty high up on my list of priorities. And I also I completely agree that the platforms should abstract away as much of the programmer's work that is not directly related to their unique novel idea as possible. Because that allows the developers to focus on the unique parts of their application, that idea that they had in their head. That's the thing that matters. And at the highest level, the ultimate platform would mean that developers could ship just their idea and everything else is taken care of, from hosting to performance to server side to client to sessions and data. And all of that is just, a thing of the past as far as the developer's concerned. And so I do believe that platforms, it's part of a platform's like good governance and responsibility to put in what feels like disproportionate amount of work for what might otherwise feel like smaller DX gains. And I think when you compound that over time, that's where developers really get back into that like super joyful flow state of development. And Tanner, I mean, it's so apparent with what you've built that the developer experience is just always there. It's like the high and mighty. And I think there's a lot of shared philosophy around that.
Yeah, I think one of
Thanks.
there's like these things about like AWS or something, right? Or like never raise prices, right? Like we only drop prices, right? Kind of a thing. I think there's a nice aspirational goal to have that we try to maintain, right? Where it's like, if your user doesn't benefit from it, you should minimize the time on it, right? Like no one sees it, right? So it's not part of how you're affecting their life or their workflow, right? So those things you should spend as little time as possible on and focus on the things that are specific to what you're building. So I guess that like never raise prices thing would be like, a platform should never increase complexity for you, right? It's like, I think ideally it's like, hey, the march should always be every quarter, every release, whatever, we're going to be flat or we're going to reduce complexity that's the leverage that frameworks can give you is complexity reduction, So yeah, it's when there's something new that happens, but it ultimately increases complexity, I think there's a very high burden of proof put on the benefits to support that. And I just think a lot of developers, I'm sure for some projects, that's amazing, right? They're 100% it going that heavy, let's say into SSR first is the benefits are there for them. Maybe they're content heavier, but yeah, I think a lot of developers, what they're making, those trade-offs are, it's nice to have those benefits, but those trade-offs are not necessarily worth it. So yeah, I think I believe the way that TanStack Start is weighing those things is it certainly fits our user base a lot better. It fits our developers a lot better. So yeah, super excited about it.
There's no one size fits all. Like we just can't, right? Otherwise you'd be AWS, but like even that doesn't fit all, because look what we're building for folks who are actually building like customer facing products. So we actually have Tanner, we have a demo. We have Tom Ballinger from Convex who has a demo. Is it cool with you if we hand it over to Tom to show people what he's done?
Absolutely. I've gotten previews of this demo, and I'm really excited to see the finished product. So let's do it.
Amazing. Okay, Tom B, are you there? All right. He's I think he's wiring it up. He's turning on the computer, he's pushing the turbo button.
And the backstory here is because I see like Dev asking in the chat and stuff like that. Yes, we have been working quietly on an integration. Tom's been working in the last few weeks on being pretty plugged into TanStack Start, and so like we're pretty excited to like ship something pretty tightly integrated. Is with as the alphas come out here of TanStack Start, we kind of want the Convex TanStack Start integration to be ready to go and ready to use. So yeah, Tom's demo here is kind of a preview of the work in progress.
Sweet, great. So I'm going to show two kind of snippets, two pieces, because the way that we've integrated with TanStack Start is sort of progressive, and it has not been. I mean, there's lots of details, right? But the way Tanner set this up, it's not too complicated. It's great. Well, the first thing is we want people to be able to use Convex with React query, right, with TanStack query. And that's I'm going to look at that integration first, because once we had that, then Tanner kind of set up both in a very generic way. Hey, if you need to, dehydrate, hydrate arbitrary things to get them from the SSR up to the client, you can do that, but also is implemented a way to do that with React query directly. So first off, here's just what it looks like to be using. Let's try to find which window to share. How about VS Code? Great. Let's see what's visible here. Are you looking at a VS Code?
We're looking at a black
screen. Ooh, okay. Well, it's still very secret, I guess.
I like that. It's just that's like a new Vim theme or something, right?
Right. It's just do
I've
audio
heard
cues.
of dark,
Great.
but this is
No,
I have
great. All
a
right.
this probably lots of people do, but I have a keyboard, a black keyboard that the keycaps are all blank on it, and that's what that screen reminds me of. It's it's actually impractical for me to use, but if I really want to impress one of my friends, I'll like leave it out, be like, oh, that old thing, yeah, I can, I don't. Oh, you have letters on your keys? Oh my. Okay, so Tom, we see
Great. So
some
we're
GitHub.
just going to look, instead of VS Code, we're going to just look at it here. And I bet it's going to be, it's like convex query. That's what we've called it. There's a piece of code I want to look at, and I'm having trouble sharing VS Code. And that piece is, let's see, here in our example. So what that, oh, no, this is the integration. It's the example here.
It looks like there was an example.tsx in that folder.
Oh, okay, okay, that sounds good. There is. Is that a whole? But yeah, great. So let's just look at a little code here. So right, Convex is this platform that gives you live subscriptions to any query you subscribe to. TanStack Query is this platform that this library that helps you maintain as up to date as possible, or as up to date as is relevant for your users' views of specific queries. And to smash these together, I mean, they go very nicely together. We have two different ways that you can use, a convex function. If you have this is a, vanilla use query coming from TanStack Query. And if you have, say, a convex action, you have something in convex that you want to run just the very traditional way, the way that TanStack queries always worked. You say, hey, I want to run this convex action on this thing. And then if we open up one of these, you're following my tabs, right? Yeah. So then I'm back over here. Up here, this weather is an example of that, where this is something that every time I hop into another tab, hop back here, I'm going to see a new value here, right? This should be live updating, 47, right? So that's good old React query, just the kind of behavior you want. But then there's something else, which is if you have a convex query here, and if you're using, again, good old TanStack query with a convex query, now this is something that's going to live update. And so as I make changes, and since I have trouble with multiple tabs, it's going to be hard to see the liveness here a bit. But if I have, if I have two of these, and I make a change in one of them, the change is immediately here. And that is not the, on switch tab, let's refresh that data. This is the convex vision of the future, where everything is kind of perfectly cached. Everything is consistent. All the views of my data here, because I used a convex query, are going to be these live updated views. And so that's great. And that is a helpful integration that's similar to the SDK we've been providing folks. But then there's the next step of saying, okay, but how do I get that, that some of the simplifications that Jamie's talking about, where I'd really like to have all my data rendered at SSR. It all shows up on that first render, but also I want it to live update. And that's kind of handoff, right, between, yes, during SSR, we need that data to pop up, but then I want those data to be live updating after that. And in addition to live updating, it's consistently live updating. I want all the different queries I'm using in my page to match with each other. And I've got other code, just to show code example, that'll be TanStack Router. Yeah, let's hop over to Router.
Tanner, was that a question?
Can I just want to say something really fast, that what you just said is such an underrated statement. You said, I want the server-side experience, server-side rendering experience, first fast load, everything. But I also want to continue to be a real-time, very interactive experience. And it seems like, I don't know why, but with the movement recently of many frameworks, it's what we're trying to pull you to one side or the other. And I think that's the wrong choice. There shouldn't have to be a choice, right? We should be able to have both. And you pull too hard to one side on the server and you say, great, we did it, fast page speed loads or whatever, hydration, but then you get back to the client and you kind of go, well, crap. Now we kind of miss TanStack query, right? And so what you're about, I'm just excited about what you're about to show. So.
Yeah, that's
Totally. Yeah.
that's wild. That like
Yeah,
very few times do we get the best of both worlds. But
That's
okay,
exactly
go
it.
on, go on.
We want both. It's like this session handoff idea we've been working on for a while, and it's awesome that achieving it at TanStack was, to be honest, so easy because like, you already have a lot of the hooks we needed, and yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. To TanStack's credit, right? This is the TanStack starts credit. The way this is set up and the way Tanner's kind of piped this through, he's made it very easy to do with React Query in particular, but also, I know you're just giving us the right abstractions, Tanner, which has been so helpful for, or the right hooks, the right saying like, all right, I have data on the back end, I'd like to get the front end. But I'll show it here. So we've got one way you can do this is, hey, I have some data that I want. If I use suspense query here, then I can get this thing to give me the data that I want on during that SSR, block on it if that's what I want. If I want my page load to be a little bit slower, but have the data there, which is often a choice you want to make, then I can do that. But then make it live once it gets here. So let's take a look at, this really is like, right, this is the main magic thing I want to show, because I think the implementation is less, it's good to see how to set this thing up. But we can look at that router page, but what's going on here is just saying, yeah, again, this is just regular old use suspense query from TanStack query. And I'm saying, this is the data that I would like to be available initially. And this is the data I would like to be live updating over time. To go back, this is going back a little bit, but here, this is the previous example. I can use a TanStack DevTools here to see, oh, okay, I have one view of these messages that is always up to date. It's green here saying, yeah, it's fresh. And then I have my yellow one, the kind of stale one that if I were to change tabs would come back and do a refresh. And just the power to be able to hook those up is great. But then when you're extending that to the back end here, again, this is a live thing that renders this is a new example. This is the code we're just looking at. This is showing, look, great, this stuff is live. And again, if I could have two tabs here, my screen sharing is messed up, but we can see that this is stuff that's happening live, but also on that initial render, it can all be there. And I get to make choices, right? I get to decide when I want to say, great, here are the 3 levels of data that I actually want to be there on that initial render. And then some of this stuff can render later. And I get to make that decision. It reminds me of the old demos that Misko would do of like, look, you just add a weight somewhere and that determines whether this code comes from which side. This is really getting all of that and a very small overhead if you then want to increase the, if you want to ensure that data is loaded.
And just
I'm go ahead. Yeah.
One thing I was going to just clarify, because it might not be obvious for people watching, but like in some respects, the only thing you changed about the way this component looks is use suspense query versus use query, right? And so there's no extra loader that's specifying what data is needed, and there's no server side component versus a client side component. It's the code is almost the same basically, right? It's like
totally
effectively, yeah. So one pretty small change, and then great, you have an SSR version of that component as well. And by the way, it remains a live SPA component. It hands the session off so that you still have this highly interactive app after the page loads.
And I think it's important to note here too that like we're approaching this kind of from the application side, and there's choices of do I want the page to wait while we execute this on the server and have everything come down ready to go as HTML, right? There's that choice. And that choice involves, do I waterfall or do I not? And everybody wants to get rid of these waterfalls, right? But that depends on, is the rest of your app fast and this one thing is slow, or there's decisions there to make. And having those decisions be incremental is really important. And the ability to just go from use query to use suspense query and just have everything all of a sudden work on the server is amazing. And then I know the next question somebody's going to ask is say, well, doesn't that create a waterfall? And you say, yeah, it does, but it's really easy to get rid of that waterfall. You just take that same convex query that you're passing to use suspense query and you prefetch it in a loader and you're done.
Right. Yeah, if you want to use a loader to eliminate it, you can, but you can opt into that incrementally instead of. The other thing too is, and this is getting a little into like the convex Swedes and vision stuff, is that like over time, I love that option's available. We are betting that people are going to find they don't have to use it that often because convex is this deterministic data pushing system that understands when data is always fresh. We can just edge cache all these values. And so most of the time your waterfalls, you're probably not even really going to notice because it's going to be 5 milliseconds away. And
Agreed.
so I think it's great, though. I love the fact that option is still there. So if someone is like, the nth degree of performance matters to me for this page, and then yes, with TanStack Start, they can still use a loader and they can just knock the whole waterfall out if they want. But our guess is, and a lot of our users have found this, that like if you kind of keep things simple and let the platform evolve, like it will end up being fast enough with the simple code most of the time, right? So that's our hope and our kind of vision for like ways we can use Convex to keep your code simple, basically, right?
Fast enough for your users, right? And that's another important thing, is that nobody's users are the same. They care about some things equally, but not every user cares about the same things, even across different apps that they use. So,
I mean, I feel like the frameworks and libraries that enable incremental implementation and incremental adoption are like, for somebody like me, it's like a dream come true. It's like for me, that's such an important choice, that I don't have to have this anxiety of like all or nothing. And if I choose all, that might take me longer. It just will, before I can get that all of the best practices implemented. It's going to take me longer before I can get my software in front of people, in front of my users. And then later on down the road, it can be additionally a little bit more difficult or a little bit more time consuming to then go and make some of those updates or change any of that sort of underlying architecture. And so that the incremental adoption feels really important. And I think in the past, there might have been a little bit too much of a trade-off, where it was, yes, you can get up and running incrementally with this, but it's typically maybe not going to, it hasn't proven itself at like production scale yet. And so you can get something out the door really quick, but then if and when it takes off, you are scrambling to keep it going and to start like layering in some of those more sophisticated patterns at the exactly wrong time. Like that is by definition when you don't want your product to go down, is when everybody in the world has discovered it and fallen in love with it. And today, this is what I mean when like we are spoiled, we are blessed these days with these types of frameworks that allow both. And Tom, to your demo, can I just, I mean, all three of you are better experts on this than I am by far. So forgive me if it's an obvious question. But when you showed the use suspense query with the convex query, are you saying that like that was a server-side component that metamorphosizes into a client side component?
Like if we use non-standard like definitions of those words, yes, but so yeah, roughly yes, right? But when we say server component, usually we mean something something that's a dedicated server component that would never run on the client. But what that was saying there was, and what Tanner's done with this platform is make it give you control over, and it's a little more than just is it a suspense query, because there's even more knobs you could provide, like, all right, maybe I want different suspense boundaries that router lets you use. But yeah, it's saying like, hey, I don't even want to render this code, and suspense is right. Two cool things. One is I don't want to think about this code when it's not loaded, right? Like it's just a nicer way to say like, you know what, the loading is not a loading state is not the responsibility of every little aspect of my app. I'm going to kick this up to the next suspense boundary, and then we can have conventions. And sorry, Tanner should be talking about this, but it is convenient, and then it's also information about during the server-side rendering in that first render, which pieces do you want to be there ahead of time and not. And
Right.
that Router just gives us that flexibility to say, sometimes I want that waterfall, right? So I want 1 or 2 levels of waterfall because that will let me fetch this data and not think about those intermediate states. But also that lets me, with the loaders, I can go in and say, actually, I would like this stuff to be available. And React Query does a nice job, and Convex does a nice job at maintaining that data. Things like when I transition to another page, that some of that data will already be loaded, was already in cache. We can remember some of that data. React Query does this with, it's a little bit stale. With Convex, it's going to be a totally live subscription. But the idea is similar where, it's still there and it gets to be reused in this way.
I mean,
sorry, Tanner, do you want to say
awesome.
say some of this stuff a little better?
No, I mean, I can dive into the technical aspects of it, but I think what you said was fantastic. The fact that you can explain it and not me is a good sign. So
that's, well done. That's all you. Yeah, well, that's the text. Yeah, that's great.
I will just add that, at the end of the day, I know people are going to overthink TanStack Start. They're going to overthink the framework, and that's because of the status quo and the example that's come before it. They're going to look at it through the lens of Next.js and Remix and even Redwood. They're going to look at it through the lens of server components. But at the end of the day, it really is just like rendering your client-side application on the server for the first page load. That's really all it is. And some people might have forgotten that that's how we've been doing SSR for the last 10 years. We were just doing it with render to string instead of render to pipeable or readable stream. That's the only difference. So using TanStack Start and TanStack Router, in this SSR environment, I don't know, for me, it's like you can go back to those kind of isomorphic thought patterns. You can say, okay, I'm just doing this same thing on the server and the client. And in some places, I can choose to only run something on the server. And hopefully soon in places you can say, I only want to run something on the client. And you'll just have the right knobs to do that. But otherwise, what you write runs everywhere, unless you specify. And I think that's probably one of the most defining differences of TanStack Start, is that it's kind of embracing the last 10 years of SSR that we have been obsessed with in the React ecosystem and just as JavaScript frameworks in general. That doesn't mean that I'm not that I don't have React server components working and could ship very soon. I'm kind of just waiting for the right moment there. I just wanted everything to feel like home, especially to an SPA that's been around for potentially up to 8 to 10 years. Been around in the React ecosystem. There are some companies that have been using React for a very long time. And I wanted them wanted to give them a tool that they could switch to that doesn't change the way that they have to think drastically to take advantage of all these awesome new primitives. So,
I mean, it's a beautiful sentiment. The like, I just want to feel like I'm at home, and it's like that is really nice. Okay, so I would like to ask just a couple minutes left. If there's anybody watching and there are questions, please send your questions through whatever platform you are watching this in, and we'll try to get to those as well. And while those are coming in, Tanner, is there anything about like the current state of TanStack Start you want to share with anybody? Like, where is it? Can people use it? Should people use it? What's the what's today look like for Start?
So I kind of snuck into alpha over the last week and a half. I wanted it to be pre-alpha testing, and then more people showed up than I expected. So I guess we're in an alpha state right now. If you go to tanstack.com/start, you can click on that start block and go to the documentation. You can see some examples that we have. There's some doc and example links up there at the top. We're still working on the marketing page, so whatever. But yeah, you can play around with it today. There's probably still going to be some changes that we make based on feedback and just based on my own little tinkerings with the framework. I think there's exciting things coming though. Like, out of the box, we adopted a request response model similar to Remix just to keep things simple. But we're going to be opening up that API to use the full gamut of H3 and Nitro utilities. So you can do things like set headers or get headers, or set status or get status anywhere inside of server functions. We just barely launched API routes. So you can just have API routes. They're all as type safe as we could get them without rebuilding TRPC or Convex or something like that, which is where we kind of just say, hey, here's API routes. If you want to do API routes that can also be type safe, you should use something like Convex. And then beyond that, I think there's just a couple more little utilities to kind of take care of. We're really not far off from getting into beta and polishing things up and just calling it 1.0. So it's obviously not something I'm going to say it's stable and nothing's going to change, so come and adopt it today. But if you're excited and you want to play around with it, now is a better time than any to jump in. Right now, they're clonable examples, so we don't have a CLI yet to scaffold anything, but we will soon. And honestly, that scaffolding tool is probably just going to do what I would tell you to do anyway, to go to one of the examples that we have and clone it and install and run it. That's it. But good news, TanStack.com has been using TanStack Start in production for 8 months now.
Hey, there we go. Nice little
Yep.
tidbit.
Yeah, all the way from experimental stage, we started using it right away, and it's worked great. We've been running it on Vercel, hosting all of our documentation on different repos and pulling them all into the same site. So doing some really fun stuff. And it just made that process really great.
That's very cool. So I'm one of those people who, like, the day it comes out, I'm installing whatever the iOS early alpha, early beta is. And I'm like, I got one phone, it's a daily driver, but I'm installing this operating system. Same thing with like my Mac. And, for better or for worse, I can't help it. I love to try new things. So it sounds like for people like me, like just to dive in and give it a go. And I think to your point, it's early. Like feedback here is high leverage, right? Which is fantastic. Okay, so
just like you guys got in early and said we care about this. I mean, how much of the primitives have changed to support your use cases just over the last month or two? I'm excited about those levels of cooperation. So it's like, if you want to build on top of TanStack Start as a platform, absolutely start playing with it right now so that we can make sure that those primitives are in place. So that on day one of launch, your product or your platform or your utility or whatever just kind of works flawlessly.
Yes.
And that's the level of cooperation and flexibility that I think TanStack stands for, is that we're not just here to build great tools for everybody, but we also want to work really closely with the community in what people actually want out of their software. And we're not afraid to take that feedback to heart and actually do it, So
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Okay, with just really just a couple minutes left, there is one or two questions coming in here. So, Dev. So Dev asked a question: is a Start and Convex first-party integration coming?
Yeah, it is. Fredo's left the station. It's I don't know if it's arrived or not, but this is stuff you can use today, just like the router stuff. And there's work to be done. We've got issues open because people are starting to use this and say, hey, the integration could be a little tighter here. Hey, we have to decide what these semantics mean. I think it should mean this. So there's that stuff's happening, and you can start using that piece of it today. When I say this is using TanStack, for Start Convex first party. I don't know. What does first party mean in this context? We're talking to Tanner about it.
I'd almost say that like the reason somebody would ask that question is that are they going to work really, really well together and seamlessly? And the answer is yes. Does it even need to be some first party integration where it's like TanStack Convex package? I mean, I think the beauty of it is that they don't, because they can compose together so well that
Mhm.
you literally create the first party integration with a couple lines of code right there in the getting started. That's it. You know, we don't need to create special black box code to marry these two technologies together.
It's a beautiful thing. It's with a little cooperation and some good communication. Look at us, huh? Look at us. Okay, there is one more question here, maybe two. Okay, what's a good real world example of a site using TanStack?
I mean,
I
It's a lot of the internet.
a lot of the internet uses TanStack query.
I mean, while I don't necessarily think like somebody says I want to build the fastest e-commerce platform you've ever imagined. I don't think I would recommend TanStack Start to do that right now. But there's many use cases that I wouldn't say go for it, because you can. If you want to build a marketing site, if you want to build an application that's completely behind auth, if you want to build a content site, tanstack.com is basically a content site for documentation. So I mean, I think you could pretty much build anything that you want with this technology. There are trade-offs that we talked about. It leans heavy into the client. It leans heavy towards applications and interactivity. So if you like those things, then you should use it. If you would rather not like those things, then use something else. But yeah, I think that your creativity is probably the limit here, just as it would be with any other framework, to be honest. So
Yeah. Okay. Last one here. Shane Codes asks, while building TanStack Start, did you mean to make a tool that will work well for a module federation framework, or was it just from building on fundamentals already in place?
I mean, I have had both Zachs from like Zach Jackson from Module Federation World. I've had him in my ear for many years. He definitely wasn't demanding anything from me, but I wanted to build good primitives that were just based on asynchronous operations and incremental API building, things like that. So. Uh, I don't know if it's going to be the perfect tool for Module Federation, but some people are telling me that it works great. Um, I know that people who care about Module Federation are excited about TanStack Start, and that's about all I can tell you, because I personally am not a big user of it. So you kind of just have to go off of what other people have said.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, right at time. Thank you, Tanner, so much. Tom, demo was fantastic. Jamie, always a pleasure. I really appreciated and enjoyed the chat today. I know exactly what I'm doing after this call, and it's getting some TanStack Start up and running and poking around. I purposely held off to surprise myself during this call with like the demo and everything, but I'm diving in. I'm doing it right now.
Well, yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks all.